Hello, I'm a student of Bhikkhu Candana. This is just a reminder that he is a homeless monk, depending entirely on donations to live and share the Dhamma. If you want to help support Bhante, our teacher, please consider donating to this cause. Thank you and enjoy.
Today, we return to the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, for yet another powerful sutta discourse that helps us to look at the causal factors how things turn out to become something, the things that we identify them as such. Paccaya is a term we find quite a number of times throughout the suttas. Conditionality, conditioning, being conditioned by, caused by. But for some reason, in the back of the mind, there's this tendency to consider or think of this conditionality as being something outside of oneself, something that you do not have the control over, as it were. Things have been set in motion without your involvement and things like that. Sometimes there is that misconception, in fact, wrong view. That goes contrary to what Lord Buddha taught. So in this Dhamma and discipline, we see the principle of causation. Nidana is another word for it. Interestingly enough, this sutta comes from the collections of connected discourses that are under the heading of Nidana Vagga, which is the discourses dedicated to the theme of causation, and from Nidana Samyutta, the collection underneath that, and the Mahavagga, which is the final large group of the Samyuttas. The title of today's discourse, the sutta, is Atthirāga Sutta. Atthirāga Sutta. It's a seemingly very simple sutta in the way that the principles are being delineated for us from the very beginning as to the main essence, the spinal column of the discourse itself. But it's one that requires us to really give it an expanded, accepted, or accepting attitude. And that's why it's so crucial for, prior to the discourse or the sutta being read, listened to, explored, for the mind, the heart, to come to a state of stillness, of serenity. To be able to really absorb. Otherwise, it's like covering the ground with tarp or with some plastic, heavy-duty, thick, impenetrable, non-porous material. And the soil underneath it is craving, is in need of, is thirsty for water, for rain. So we need to remove that layer. And the way to do that, in the context that I'm suggesting here, is to allow the mind to come to a place of rest, thanks to your sitting, to your meditation. As you allow the words spoken the words of Dhamma that come through us, to us, through the Nikayas, across the centuries, to deliver. Wisdom is there for us to experience. The Dhamma is the only teaching that holds the key for liberation. Lord Buddha is very clear on this. In the book of the Tens of the Anguttara Nikaya, where sutta after sutta, Lord Buddha states again and again and again and again how liberation can only be attained through the Noble Eightfold Path. Understanding can only be gained through the cultivation and development of the Noble Eightfold Path, which can only be found within this Dhamma and discipline. So here is the opportunity every time you sit to meditate, trying to take these gems of Lord Buddha's teachings with us. As we'll find out from this sutta as well. So be soft, please. Be open, please. This is sutta number SN, because it's Samyutta Nikaya, SN 12.64. It is the Atthirāga Sutta, when passion is present. When passion is present. And again, it is from the Mahavagga, or the great section. While living in Savatthi, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus by saying, Bhikkhus, there are these 4 types of nourishment that are necessary to maintain the health of sentient beings who are already alive, and for the assistance and support of those beings who are yet to be born. Now, what are these 4? The nourishment of edible food that is consumed, whether solid or liquid, coarse or refined. Secondly, there is the nourishment of contact. Thirdly, there is the nourishment of intentional thinking. And fourthly, there is the nourishment of consciousness or sense awareness. These are the 4 types of nourishment that are necessary to maintain the health of sentient beings who are already alive, and for the assistance and support of those other beings who are yet to be born. This mention of nourishment, sometimes in English translated as nutriment, in Pali it's called ahara. There are so many beautiful, lovely, ornate suttas, discourses, where Lord Buddha is discussing these, giving so many examples, some of which we've covered in our series here, Sutta Exploration Series. But as I was mentioning about causation, depending on what theme Lord Buddha wanted to touch upon, what tool to use, what principle to use from the Dhamma, here he's choosing nourishment, ahara. He could, if he wanted to, he could start off from discussing feelings or the 4 great elements or the 4 noble truths. He's just picking today in this sutta, the nourishment. Now, when we talk about this practice, why do we suffer? For example, first noble truth, let's pick that, dukkha. Because there's a body. Well, why? Because there was a birth. But if a being is born already, they need to be sustained by food, ingestible, consumable, edible, drinkable sustenance. Lord Buddha was not denying that. Food is important to sustain the body of those who are already born alive. But there are those who are not yet born, such as a person whose vijnana consciousness is still is looking for the nama rupa to attach itself to in an embryo. So they too need food. There's a wonderful sutta in the several Nalakalapi Sutta, the bundle of reeds, where Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahakotita are discussing this. Vijnana and Namarupa. They lean against each other. You remove one, the other falls. You remove Vijnana, Namarupa falls. They are needed to allow the embryo to turn into a living being. Not only that, sometimes it breaks off from the uterine wall, and let's say there's a miscarriage. There goes that. Vijnana cannot survive without Namarupa. Namarupa cannot survive without Vijnana. That's why they lean against each other. But they need food. And that's what, I don't want to get into that because that's really a big topic. So today's is on, passion when it's present. So we're looking at it from a different angle. So I want to be able to address the other nourishments. Then we have contact. Contact. This is one area of nourishment or nutriments that I've always been curious in my, beginning days of studying the Dhamma. Like, what is that? How could that be? Like contact, like how could that be food? I can't put a straw in there and, like drink it. What is contact? And then you start to see how we are always craving to be touched. Your eyes, they're moving. They're very perturbed. When you look at them, they look like two crazy people sitting in your skull, always looking around, always looking for where the next action is. Same thing with the ears. The nose, always looking for something that is outrageous, something bombastic, something that's loud, something that grabs attention. And so long as attention is being given, contacts rule our lives. The moment we pull away our attention giving through these six sense doors, suddenly it really doesn't matter. They come and go. So there's the nourishment of contact. And there's six. I mentioned the ears, the eyes, the nose, the tongue. Body. And the big one, the mind, which is always looking for something that could keep the engine, the gears going, working day and night and day, always. It is nourishment for it, making contact. Then you get to the third one, mano sancetana. This is interesting because this involves some willpower, if not all about willpower, because it is You can think of it as intentional thinking, not just randomly, but reaching over. This is where you can tie it with what I was mentioning earlier about giving attention to something. Throughout the day, see if you can tally, see if you can write down how many times, just mark like a prisoner does, on the wall. Write how many times in a day you feel like you have to be thinking about something or willing something, wanting to do something. This takes it to another level, what we were talking about earlier about contact. So this is a deeper level because there is volition involved here. But we think that this is part of life, this is part of just how things are. We never look at them as, especially this, as a nourishment, something that we feed off of. And that's why so many people get bored when they do a retreat. But when you're just sitting in your own room and you're trying to meditate without music, without anything, no noise, nothing to distract you, nothing to be looking at. So many people run out of retreats because it is too much. Why too much? Because it does not leave much room for thinking, intentional thinking for you to be doing something. Oh, I need to go get there, get this, and do that. Food, as we see, has many nuances. And then we get to the last one, the fourth ahara, which is consciousness. Again, when we read references or mention or instructions on consciousness, in Pali it's vijnana. In this Dhamma and discipline, Lord Buddha is only talking about the 6 consciousnesses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. And all of the different derivations of these 6. This is a far more refined level. So in a way, you can think of these 4 as a gradient. The heavy-duty, solid or liquid, but very dense, in a sense, food, compared to the contact food or nutriment or nourishment, one is much more gross or grosser than the other. Then you take it from the contact or phassa to manosancetana, intentional thinking, the third ahara. Suddenly we're talking about something that's far more subtle. And then you go to even more subtle, the fourth one. They're not the same as the second. The last and the second are not the same. Sometimes people get confused because we make contact through the 6 sense doors. But in this case, with the contact, phassa, ahara, or nourishment of contact, there is more of an active involvement in wanting to go out and seek after the making of contact, versus the fourth ahara, the nourishment of consciousness or vijnana itself. It's far more passive. This is where the mind has gone so deep that it's detecting finest levels of almost invisible but very present subtle layers of consciousness. And this is where the tanha is still there. The person who's not yet an arahant is unable to see that. That's why it's called the last sangyojana, the very last fetter that needs to be overcome and destroyed, which is ignorance. Ignorance of what? One of them you can say is this: Very important principle. It is not so obvious, but Lord Buddha listed it. That's why this Dhamma is complete. Nobody could come around, no commentator, no person could come up and say, aha, I have just discovered a new thing about the Dhamma that Lord Buddha didn't cover. That is impossible. It only has to be discovered within oneself. Everything is laid out. So, here is the important, other layers of the importance of this sutta. Okay, there are the 4 types of nourishment that are necessary to maintain the health of, okay, and for the assistance and support of other beings who are yet to be reborn. So this is the premise. This is the beginning of the establishing shot. If you were doing movies, this would be the establishing shot of, okay, this is the premise of where we're going to start from. Now we get to the interesting part. Remember, this is coming from the list of connected discourses dealing with causation. And here we go. We're going to see what's happening. When bhikkhus, passion is present towards edible food, as one is being nourished by it, if there is delighting in edible food, as one is being nourished by it, and if there is craving towards edible food, as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness, vijnana, will have a place for it to land and thus continue on developing, for it has already become anchored. There's a lot going on here. 3 things that I need you to be able to, at the start, just at the onset of this, pay very close attention to. Lord Buddha says, when passion is present towards edible food, remember, he's now addressing each of these aharas, each of these nourishments. So he's going to start from the actual edible, consumable food. If he says there's passion towards this thing which is nourishing us, the food, if there is delighting in edible food, and if there is craving, therefore, then you just made it possible for vijnana to, and this is in relation to a person either at the end of one's life or in everyday, every moment to moment living, where the consciousness is landing somewhere. We're always seeking the next best thing, the next thing, to cover up for this disappointment that just happened. And every experience that is given to us through the 6 sense doors ultimately is dukkha, because it's dissatisfying. It is impermanent. That says it all. So 3 things, if there is raga, atthirāga, that's the title of the sutta, don't forget. If there's passion towards the food you're eating, before eating, during eating, after eating. The other day I was, someone had offered lunch dana, and I noticed individuals on the table were talking about food other than that was available on the table. There was plenty of food on the table, but I noticed how individuals had started to speak about other times when they had other kinds of food while they're eating this food on this table at this moment. What is that? That includes all 3: passion, delight, and definitely craving. So here is an opportunity for us to pause, to look at, and carefully see what our involvement is. Remember, causation. Causing what? Passion, the delight, and the craving itself are the causes, the nidanic factors, right? So what are they causing? The landing of vijnana into another womb or into the next moment where we are craving, ponobhavika it's called, the wanting to re-become yet again, yet again, yet again. So if you want to end this endless cycle, Lord Buddha is saying you need to target these three. Is there passion in you while you're eating food? Is there delight in you while you're eating food or drinking it? Or is there craving in you while you're eating food? This is a huge revelation. No other teaching provides us with this kind of specific details, a manual as to what is going on and why we suffer. You don't need philosophical schools to debate things. It's right there in our face, in front of us. And then Lord Buddha here is elaborating it even more. He's opening it up more to make it more clear for us. Now, when consciousness has a place for it to land and thus continues on growing, seeing that it has become established, then as a result, name and form, nama rupa, gets pulled into a womb, and thus it too becomes established. Nama rupa. Now, nama rupa is a very, in many circles, it's been misunderstood. Sometimes it's just translated as mentality, physicality, or materiality, and that's the end of that, and we move on. I laugh because oftentimes I remember in the past when I was one time I was in Asia and I was asking a very well-known teacher as to what Namarupa is. I mean, I knew what, I had studied for many years, fine, I get it, intellectual, this and that, conceptually, I get it. It was just giving the runaround in a sense. And then I came across some suttas, especially with Venerable Sariputta, not just him, but Samādhi Sutta, etc., from Majjhima Nikaya and others, where there was a clear explanation as to what is meant by nama. By the way, if you notice, nama rupa does not have a hyphen. It doesn't have a separation. It doesn't have a space bar hit in between to separate. They're one word. But the mind likes to make things a little bit more concretized. It likes to put labels on things, nice stickers, thumbtacks, so we know this is this and that is that. This is the beginning and that is the ending. And then the other thing starts. Language only goes so far. Language can never offer us the Dhamma. The Dhamma can use language to penetrate through our ignorance. But the language itself can never be the Dhamma. It's just a tool. This is where commentators get it wrong. So this is where the problem had started with Venerable Buddha Ghosha when he divided it, and other commentaries that he wrote pertaining to Nama portion, where he deviated from what the explanation of it in the suttas is. You have Vedana, you have Sanya, you have Sanchetana or Manasikara, you have contact, and you have intention, Chetana, and Manasikara. So Chetana, contact, Chetana is the volition, the intention. Contact is the passa. Manasikara is the attention that we need to give. Then we have the sanya, or the perception, and then we have the feeling. So these things need to be there, plus the rupa portion, which is the mahabhuta, chatu mahabhuta, which are the four great elements. We've gone over them. Patavi, the earth, which is solidity, fluidity, heat, and airiness. These things, you put them together, then you have namarupa. But it needs vijnana. So basically, without really getting into too much, too much, just know this part, like I was mentioning, the two bundles of reeds. One is vijnana, the other one is namarupa. In order for us to have a being show up, that being needs both. Remember, in the beginning, Lord Buddha was saying, if you have passion towards edible food, if you have delight, nandi, it's called in Pali, and if you have craving, tanha, then consciousness, that consciousness of the desiring, of having passion, and of having delight, that will land somewhere. Now, the vijnana itself is not enough to bring about the beginnings of a being. You need namarupa to join in. And then Lord Buddha points out, when name and form, that's how I usually translate it to make things a little bit easier, is pulled into a womb and becomes established, then as a result, sankhara, which I translated as activating habitual drives, because they activate, they prepare. It's a momentum. The sankhara find a new home for them to grow and continue being expressed. Sankharas. Remember, there's three kinds of sankhara, to simplify. Bodily sankharas, which are called kaya sankhara, verbal or speech-related sankhara, and mano sankhara, which are, I'll start from the back, from the reverse, perceptions and feelings are actually the mano sankharas, the mental activating habitual drives, the tendencies, the drives that we have. They could be good or bad on the outside. Second one is the verbal. Now, interestingly enough, in the Chula Vedalla Sutta, we see this beautifully laid out between the Venerable Bhikkhuni, Dhammadina, and her previous husband, before she became ordained, the lay disciple, Visakha, who was himself an anagami. She was an arahant, by the way. So he's asking her as to how many are the sankharas, and she explains this beautifully. And we've done this a few years ago, actually, that sutta itself, the Chula Vedalla Sutta. And in it, we see how the verbal sankharas, she is explaining beautifully, are thinking and pondering, vitakka vichara. Before we speak, we have to think in the mind, what Bhante Nyananda calls subvocal speech. That's the verbal, vachi sankhara. Then you have the physical, bodily sankhara. That, she also explains this beautifully, as the breathing in and breathing out. This is the most simplistic or simple way of understanding sankhara. That's very relatable. When you're about to push yourself up from a sitting posture, what do? You either hold your breath or expel the air in your lungs. What are you doing? You're creating momentum. You're moving the body from a state of inertia into a state of activity, kinetically. The breath has to be doing something. And similarly with thoughts. Before we speak, we have already been pondering it. It's been echoing in between your ears, as it were. And similarly with the feelings. You can go both ways. When you're having a very negative thought, it will affect the conversation that's going on in your mind. And that will affect the pattern of breath or breathing in your lungs. So you see how anxiety, stress, trauma are all about this. This is not a separate area of human endeavor, of understanding of life. This is one thing and trauma is something else, or difficulties in life, stressors and dukkha. No, they're part and parcel. So Lord Buddha is giving us the map, the roadmap, for us to see what's happening. Well, how is each one playing a part? Next, when activating habitual drive, sankhara continue being expressed and thus grow, then as a result, there begins the fabrication for future re-becoming. So if you allow the sankharas to run wild, which is what is the state of puthujjanas, normally like, if we allow the sankharas to basically rule over our lives, where we're just sitting in the passenger seat of our lives and letting things just happen. Well, they're not just happening because the sankhara is at the wheel, or the sankhara, the plural, sankharas are at the wheel of your life. And that's where the future re-becoming comes in to the picture. Punabhava. Bhava is becoming. The puna would be the re part, prefix. Excuse me. When there is the fabrication for future re-becoming, then as a result there is rebirth, decay and aging, along with sickness and death that are now inevitably to be faced. And when there is rebirth, there is decay and aging, along with sickness, and most certainly death, I declare, which bring with them much pain, anguish, and sorrow inescapably to be experienced. Because once you're at that level, once you've reached at that point, you're too involved. The process has got you by the hook. It's like if you've ever seen those machines that destroy like heavy duty, even like hammers. Sometimes people they have these grinding teeth like things, and they're huge. They're like 2 cylinders rolling. They will gobble up whatever you put in them. Sometimes they put big cars, sometimes barrels, sometimes boxes. Despite how solid the thing is, these are so powerful that they pull you in. And once you're in, nobody can pull that thing out. Perhaps they can just switch the power off, but there is no power off at this point, because the person is too invested and they've put themselves on the line too far and they're being pulled in. There was the image in the 80s, I remember. For me, it seemed like it was a nightmare if it ever happened to me one day, where a person is leaning down and they're wearing a business suit and a tie, and the tie gets pulled in by something that's rolling like that, and the person has no it's like it's terrifying. Well, that's punabhava. We've done it countless times, folks. We've been through that countless times. The Dhamma is the switch, but we need to apply it. Yeah, knowing the red button over there that's working, it's flashing, you need to push it. And that is the Dhamma. And it starts with having sati. It starts by applying yoniso manasikara. Remember, in the five aspects, the five parts, factors of nama group I was mentioning. One of them is manasikara. Manasikara, which is attention. Lord Buddha honed in, he zoomed in on that one. That is how he was able to become the Buddha. He saw that it's a matter of misplaced attention. Can I bring in the right attention, turn miccha manasikara, or wrong attention, into yoniso? Instead of ioniso manasikara, can I turn it into yoniso, bringing it to the place of origin, where it is happening? So that was the edible food, ahara, the food that we consume, that is necessary for all those beings who are already alive and born, obviously, and those about to. Similarly, so this is going to be now about contact. Similarly, because when passion is present towards contact, as one is being nourished by it, if there is delighting in contact as one is being nourished by it, and if there's craving towards contact as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness will have a place for it to land and thus continue on developing, for it has already become anchored. So from that point on, it's the same information that Lord Buddha is giving us. However, the beginning part of each of these four huge sections is very important. So in the earlier one, we saw the importance of food, how we need to check our relationship with it. What is my connection? What is my relationship to the food I'm eating? Am I passionate towards it? Remember, this path, if we are doing if we're doing attention, manasikara, if we are on the right path, if we're consistent with our sati, if we are consistent with our sila, if we're going deeper and penetrating through wisdom, with wisdom, then we start seeing that we become disenchanted towards things that we loved and adored and were passionate about. So sometimes what happens is individuals come and say, Bhante, something's wrong, I think, because I am not as passionate as I used to be about these things. And people think that I'm going weird. So I have to remind them that actually is the healthy thing that's happening. You're the healthier person. You're the healthier party there than the others, because everybody else is lost in the passions, because we're living in the world, and Mara's realm is this, loka, this world, which is all about having passion, having delight. If you're not delighting, they say, the DSM has listed thousands of of disorders. By the way, they're discovering that most of it is it's a conflict of interest. A lot of people have gotten a lot of pay, many so-called specialists by coming up with all these disorders. So if a person doesn't have delighting, if a really advancing meditator would go to a psychiatrist and say, I'm feeling dispassion or disenchantment, they're very quickly going to reach towards their prescription notepad and write you something. Well, that's not what we are seeing here, because what will happen is this disenchantment will lead you to have these old tendencies fade away, fading away. Slowly, slowly, sometimes exponentially, until there is this thing called dispassion, viraga. And that's another thing. Viraga, the term, sometimes it's translated as dispassion. However, it has a double definition, meaning it also is a definition for fading away and dispassion. It's interesting how Pali is so rich with so many different nuances of meanings. So the person doesn't delight in contact. One is when they are being nourished by it. And there's no craving to, and if there's craving towards contact as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness will have a place for it to land. So again, these three things come up. The culprits are passion towards, in this case, phassa or contact, delighting in contact, and thirdly, when there is craving for contact. Can I have this happen to me again? Contact. I like this very much, this contact. That's the delighting. Oh, I want to devour this thing that I'm eating, which is the contact of gustatory, tasting or smelling or seeing. That's why people reach over and grab as many pictures of that sunset as possible. Otherwise, it's going to be gone. You want to hold on to that smell of that rose that's very fragrant. Oh, I want to smell it again. There was a bhikkhu, I think I mentioned the story from the Samyutta Nikaya. He's one of those recluses that is very much adamantly dedicated to going into the forest and really being a forest dwelling recluse to really attain Nibbana very quickly. So he goes and he goes to Pindapada, comes back, and he says, it's a wonderful time for me to take a shower, to go into the pond and enjoy. Okay, so he goes in there and he sees this beautiful lotus. And he goes, oh, and he leans in and starts smelling the fragrance of the flower. And there's a deva there who wants to teach him a lesson. He says, thief, I caught a thief. You're a thief. You're not a bhikkhu. And the bhikkhu says, well, how could you call me a thief? I'm a bhikkhu. I don't have anything. There's no one here for me to rob. And he says, no. You are robbing the fragrance from this flower. You're a thief. He says, how could I be stealing fragrance? He says, you are supposed to know better. You've dedicated your life. You've gone forth for a reason. You're not here to go becoming a slave to contact, to have passion, to have delight, to have craving for contact. In the Brahmayu Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, we see the young Brahmin, a student whose teacher had sent him from far away. His teacher was over 100, I think, at the time. So he sent him because he had heard that there is a Tathagata who appeared in the world, but he didn't have the energy to go see him, and he sent his best Brahmin student. And he goes, and it's a long mission. 7 months long, he is given the mission of observing every tiny detail about Lord Buddha's daily life. And from there, we get a lot of the accounts of how Lord Buddha ate, how he walked, how he entered a room, how he left a room, how he cleaned his bowl, how he looked, how he gazed, how he turned his gaze. Thanks to Uttara's report. And in it he says, although the recluse Gautama obviously has all of his 6 senses, I mean, he's able to observe the 5, but he never seems to be lost in those contacts. So when he's eating food, because it's very observable, he could see him, Lord Buddha, eating the food. He says, whether it's salty, it's sweet, it's sour, it's pungent, it doesn't matter to Gautama. Now that doesn't mean that he didn't have those senses, because even Uttara saw that Lord Buddha had all of his senses functioning perfectly. But he had punched that button. He had stopped. Puna bhava. There's no vijnana to land anywhere. It's ended. Why? Because there's no passion towards whatever is being experienced. In this case, the contact. There's no delighting in the contact, and definitely there is no craving for more of that contact. So can we do that? Can we do that? When you're seeing something beautiful, when you're touching something that you think is just superb, out of this world, can it stay there? Or are you going to have that crazy glue called passion, delight, and craving stuck, sticking you to that experience and wanting it to repeat? Now, when consciousness has a place for it to land, so he's repeating that. So again, the sutta is available as PDF on the website, mindrelease.com. Please go ahead and print it out, because it's a long sutta and I cannot possibly finish it today if I do all of these, because this is the portion where I took a lot of time earlier to go over, meaning when Lord Buddha says, when there's vijnana anchored, then there's namarupa. When there's namarupa come together, then there's sankhara, and then punabhava, etc., future becoming, and then pain, anguish, and sorrow. So now I'm going to go to the third ahara, nourishment. Similarly, bhikkhus, when passion is present towards intentional thinking, as one is being nourished by it, if there is delighting in wanting to engage in intentional thinking, as one is being nourished by it, and if there is craving towards intentional thinking, as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness, vijnana, will have a place for it to land, and thus continue on developing, for it has already become anchored. Wanting to do things can be very addictive. Now, this is a very subtle level. This is not as gross as the previous ones. Food and contact. This is a deeper level, where today's society would deem this as, this is very, this is unusual. But sometimes, for example, goal setting or wanting to think about something is quite addictive. And this is why a lot of people have a difficulty to relinquish, to give up, to abandon negative ways of thinking. Because it gives you the false sense of having control and power. That's why an individual who leaves work or retires, suddenly they feel disarray. They're completely at a loss. They feel useless because that was feeding them the job, despite the fact that they complained about it 20 hours a day. Now they're deeply seeing that where is it? Where is it? I cannot. And this is where, because there's a repeat, the gears are doing the same thing. A lot of people who leave such a demanding, let's say, work environment, responsible roles, suddenly their memory starts failing pretty rapidly. The dementia kicks in. And they really become depressed, because they are not in a position to constantly engage in intentional thinking, meaning making decisions also, constantly, because that is also addictive. Goal setting is another one. Now remember, Lord Buddha is not saying intentional thinking is wrong, mano sancetana is wrong, just like making contact is wrong, or eating food is wrong. No. Although you had schools of thought like the Jains and others who really believed in such ludicrous things. Remember Atthira's message. He was saying, Tathagata is so in tune with his senses. He's not a slave to them. He tastes things, but he's not lost in them. Similarly here, intentional thinking. Is there wisdom? In another sutta, I think it was the Puttamamsa Sutta, which we covered, Lord Buddha was saying, bhikkhus, it is through contact that one feels. It is through contact that one perceives. And it is through contact that one intends. So can I be present enough? Can I be quick enough with sati to detect these subtle, very quick and rapid changes that are happening? This is why it's so important to do sati, to be involved, present with sati. Mindfulness is not something passive, weak. Without sati, there's impossible for you to attain pañña, to reach a place of wisdom, to understand the Dhamma. Sati is very powerful, as you see here. Again, he now goes with that same recurrent explanation, elaboration, where he says, now when consciousness has a place, so when you have these three, the passions, the delight, and the craving, then vijnana will have a place for it to land, meaning either in a new womb or in a new instance, in a new moment, in the future, of from this point to the next, not a future life necessarily. Before you reach the future life, the possibility, before you reach the end of life, your life, you've had many, many moments, many future moments from this moment, where if I was living my life without proper attention, I'm missing all these opportunities to see where I'm going wrong, where I'm putting too much, where I'm lost in passion, where I'm lost in delight, where I'm lost in craving, and saying, no, next time. This is why it's so important to observe the beginning and ending of the breath, which takes us to the ability to be able to see a sensation, the beginning point, the arising of a sensation, the middle and the end. When Venerable Ananda was asked as to how a person can attain Arahantship, what are some of the tools? What is the trick? One thing where he says is, he describes just that. He says, being able to see the five aggregates, each of these, to know form as form, to see the origin of form and the ending of form, to see feeling as it is, to see the beginning of feeling and the ending of feeling, to see perception as it is, memory as it is, its beginning, how it started, and at that moment where it became dominant in your consciousness, in your awareness, and the ending of sanya. Similarly, the sankhara, those habitual drives that kicked into gear subtly out of the blue. You see it for what it is. You don't get stuck. You don't get pulled into building papanchas, but instead you look at the beginning of that sankhara and the ending of that sankhara, because they never stay, because they are conditioned. They are not real. And then you get the consciousness part. Consciousness, seeing the consciousness, whether it's smelling something, becoming aware of a sight, a sound, etc. You see it for what it is, and then you see how it started and how it ended. He says this is the path to Nibbana, becoming Arahant. But for sure, when we have passion, when we have delight, and when we have craving, it's a lost cause. We've lost it because we are too involved. We've leaned into it too much. We're no longer in charge of our lives, and as it were. And then we get to the last. And similarly, bhikkhus, when passion is present towards sense awareness as one is being nourished by it, if there is delighting in sense awareness as one is being nourished by it, and if there is craving towards sense awareness as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness, vijnana, will have a place for it to land and thus continue on developing, for it has already become anchored. So this is the sense awareness where you're, as I was saying in the beginning, as far as how to distinguish, because sometimes some people might get confused between contact, because it's in reference to the six sense doors, and here we have vijnana as the fourth ahara, nutriments or nourishment. And here Lord Buddha is saying, having passion, delight, and the relationship of craving towards each of these senses, you cannot close your ears forever. You cannot close your eyes, wear blindfold forever and not see. Even if you close your eyes, you're still seeing things. In the 152nd sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, if you recall, we did this some time ago, Indriya Bhavana Sutta, where an ascetic from another tradition, another sect comes by, and he sits there. He's very cordial, but Lord Buddha goes ahead and says, so basically, what does your teacher teach? To this student of that other teacher. And he says, oh, my teacher teaches us to basically close off our senses. When seeing something, close, not to be exposed to that, not to be exposed to the sound, not to be exposed. So you block, you block, you block, you block, you block. And that is the surest way to attain moksha or liberation. And Lord Buddha doesn't, address him. He turns to Venerable Ananda. And he says, Ananda, it seems that these guys are basically teaching a person to be blind. And how many blind people do you know who just, by the fact that they're blind, attain moksha like that? There's many moles that are blind, underground. None of them attained liberation. None of them attained arahantship. I've met a lot of blind people. I've met a lot of deaf people. This is not to mock them, of course not. But that was tantamount to saying that if you close your ears, then you're safe. You're good to go. Lord Buddha is saying, no, it's your relationship to those sense awarenesses. Vijnana, it's a diacritical mark on top of the last A. Vijnana, plural. This plays again with what Atthira had reported in the Brahmayu Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya again. So where we see how Lord Buddha was not attached to the sense doors coming in. Remember, one is leaning in. That's where the contact part comes in, where you're always panting, trying to find what the six sense doors are bringing you. This one is you're always going to be invaded by the six sense doors. Now, this is where the last nourishment part comes in. What is my relationship to that? What is my position to that? It's very subtle, but it's a far more refined state than what we saw as we started with the nourishment of food and all the way here. So this is the far end of the gradient. And then Lord Buddha says, because obviously you have those factors, then the vijnana will have a place for it to land. So I'm going to move forward to what follows here. Imagine, because there was an artist or a dyer, somebody who paints or colors things, working with various paints and dyes. As he goes on painting on a smooth wall or a heavy canvas, using such colors as rusty red, vermilion, yellow or turmeric, or some indigo shade. He does this while creating the figure of a man or a woman with all their features and reliefs down to the last detail. So the person is painting on the canvas or on a wall. Now, in just the same manner, because if there happens to be any passion present towards edible food as one is being nourished by it, if there is delighting in edible food as one is being nourished by it, and if there is craving towards edible food as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness will have a place for it to land and thus continue on developing, for it has already become anchored. So you must stop being your own Michelangelo. You must stop being the artist. There's nothing glamorous about that. There's nothing good that comes out of it. Yes, you're going to have plenty of new experiences. I knew people who would say, why do you Buddhists always want to, like, what's wrong with this life? I don't want to stop coming back. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, I want to come back again and again. And I said, do you realize what you're saying? That means teenage years again. That means junior high. That means elementary. That means diapers. And I'm not talking about this life when you're very, very old. You can't control your bowels. But I'm talking about another life where you're a baby and you're going to be walking around with diapers full of poop. These are just very simple examples. Yeah, but I want to fall in love again. I want to experience the sunrise. I want, what's that? Utujjana. This is what we have. Because they think that we, Lord Buddha's teaching here is all about negation of life. No. We have to put an understanding, get a clearer understanding, a clearer picture of what we mean by life. Suffering, anguish, depression, lamentation, Lord Buddha keeps saying again and again and again. And this whole mass of suffering shows up. So the person is taking the color palette, passion, let's give that the vermilion or red color. He's painting. And then he's using the delight, the turmeric or yellowish orange color, and he's using that. And then he's using the indigo or blue or velvety color, purple color, and he's using that. And voila, you have a new life, new moment. Punabhava. You've created new vijnana for the next moment that's going to drag us to the next moment. In that sense, this Dhamma is not for everyone. In that sense. But you need to reach, the person needs to reach a point where they cannot handle it anymore, when they cannot accept it anymore. The fact that we are this and there is only suffering and that's the end of that. That's what led Siddhartha Gautama, the prince, to leave his life as a future king. This is why it's so important for you to get up early in the morning, to push through torpor, to push through drowsiness, when you're unable to sit, when you're unable to focus, when you're saying, you know what, I've been practicing yoniso manasikara all day, wise attention all day. Can't I get a break, please? I just want to let loose. I want to eat this ice cream and be lost in it. Is there something wrong with being passionate and delighting in this chocolate ice cream? Let me just, come on, let me put my hair down and just, fine. Nobody's going to come, with a stick. And you're going to feel later on that moment empty of sati was poorly lived, wasn't rich at all. There was, and that's the thing. Lord Buddha wants us to gain more and more understanding. Similarly, bhikkhus, when passion is present towards God, so this is now a repeat, because he gave the example of the dyer or the painter. Remember, in those days, it was not allowed to write these teachings down. There were no scribes as such. So the only method that was allowed and that was accepted was the repetition, the medium of repeating, reciting again and again. So Lord Buddha had figured out that the best way was to repeat certain sections. And it almost is like a paragraph and then this interesting part where he's using an analogy, an image, a simile, which allows the brain, allows the mind to lock on, so it becomes a very powerful mnemonic device. English it cannot come even close to the Pali, of course, but the Pali, the resonating sound, the syllables, the nuances of how they flow, it's so beautiful. And again, now whatever we have 26 centuries later is still, it's not even 100% of what it used to be, because of just the factor that there's, the human factor, the human element, and time, and regions. So this is why right now we're also putting our own mark in English now in the 21st century, so that if this Dhamma, these teachings survive, they would have a better chance. And then this is why also I'm doing this, for the future, to be able to have a better understanding instead of becoming convoluted. So again, Lord Buddha goes through these. He's talking about contact, and then he talks about the same thing that we covered in the beginning, mano sancetana, and then he gets to the last portion, where he said what should not be done. And here we get to the example of a person who puts an end to it, who's punching that switch that I was referring to. The switch is not in the sutta, by the way. However, bhikkhus, when passion is missing towards edible food, as one is being nourished by it, if there is no delighting in consuming edible food, and as one is being nourished by it, and if there is no craving towards edible food as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness will have no place for it to land. And thus it will not be able to continue on, for it has no possibility for developing. As bhikkhus, Lord Buddha gave us so many tools, but formulas, where every moment of a bhikkhu's life, of a person who has gone forth their life, there are opportunities for realizing, attaining nibbana. Food is a big one, especially when you're dependent on society, on others. You've given up taking care of yourself as such. You're doing more important work. While society is, you're trusting, obviously, but society is helping you to survive. So there's that very fine linkage. Food. Now, what happens is you become top heavy on that food. And that's why I've seen individuals, even years before I became a monk, where I would see people, monks even, like food, and talking, and the body shows it. Over fascination with food. But there's a certain chant we do, either individually or together. Pati sankha yoniso pindapadang pati sevami. I'm going to apply yoniso manasikara on this opportunity that I am obtaining food. It is not to look beautiful. It is not to become even healthy, strong. But it is simply to sustain me so that I can, these are the words. Namadaya, mandanaya, navibhusanaya. Not for beautifying, but to live the brahmacharya life. So every bite that you're eating, then it becomes almost like, there's another sutta where Lord Buddha says it has like, imagine a person who has a razor blade in his mouth, on his tongue. Can you mindlessly go ahead and chew that bowl of rice with that razor in your mouth? You're going to be extremely cautious. about the position of your tongue and in connection to that blade and your teeth and your palate and your walls of your mouth. What is that? Yoniso manasikara. Who can at that moment really be lost in the food? Remember the Puttamamsa Sutta where the Lord Buddha gives the example of a mother and a father that have to kill their own one and only son, the only child they have, so that they can't, this is a story, a simile, it didn't happen, but Lord Buddha is giving an analogy. And he says the parents, because they're crossing a very long stretch of a desert, there's no way that they could survive. So they kill the child. And every time they eat the food, how much passion will they have? How much delight? How much craving will they have to eat more? Will they? That's exactly the mindset of when you sit to eat. This is for the bhikkhus. And anyone who wants to really understand the Dhamma can benefit tremendously from that powerful image. And you also see this in the Indriya Bhavana Sutta that I mentioned earlier, the 152nd Majjhima Nikaya, as far as how quickly you need to pull your mind out from being pulled in. This is not going to happen immediately, so you might be able to catch it when you are past that point where you had the passion towards food. That's okay. How fast can your sati work? Can you catch it right at the tail end of that experience of being passionate? Okay, maintain the sati until you get to right at the tail end of your passionateness or being passionate towards the food, or any of the other three. And then your sati grows until you catch yourself at that moment where you're still passionate. This is good. That means you're able to make your sati become faster and faster. So until it becomes so powerful, so quick that you're able to get sati to come in right at that moment when you're about to become passionate about the food, delight in the food, and have craving towards the food, right before it starts. That's why we do, for example, walking meditation. Because we are slowing down the body, yes, in order for us to see how quickly the mind moves, these intentions that are coming in and out, and we're doing it, we're just going like a routine. So your sati is becoming sharper and sharper and sharper and sharper. And naturally, things seem to become slower and slower and slower and slower, because now you're able to detect where passion was about to come in. Just like when you're sitting to meditate and you see a hindrance show up, versus being lost in it, and then half an hour later you wake up, it's like, oh, I was lost in restlessness or drowsiness or doubt. So as your practice grows in sati, in sampajanya, that's why meditation is never just sitting. Biggest part of your meditative life is actually being about, walking, doing things. And similarly, because when passion is missing towards contact, so I'm going to go quickly here. So he's now, I'm just reading those portions. This is when it's missing. So no longer is the person is stuck on passion. So as one is being nourished by it, if there's no delighting in contact, as one is being nourished by it, and there is no craving, then consciousness will have no place for it to land. There was, I think I mentioned him before, a venerable, a bhikkhu who was an arahant, who was living in the jungle, and some woman passes in front of him, and I think she's either naked or she's smiling and she's trying to be seductive or provocative. I don't know why, you're in the middle of the jungle, but I guess he's the only guy over there, so she's giving him so much attention, and he sees her, she's smiling, and she, he doesn't pay much attention, and she goes, obviously, because he didn't show interest. And then there's a man that runs after her, and he sees him, the Arahant, and he says, Venerable, did you see my wife? Did you see a woman pass by? And he says, I only saw teeth. Teeth, because when she smiled, he just saw the teeth. And he says, I saw the teeth. Basically, to be fair, I saw a skeleton, not just the teeth. He didn't see the lips. He didn't see what color the lips were. He didn't see how she was, I don't know, had the mascara on, or what she was smelling like, fragrance, or I don't know what. He saw the skeleton. There's no vijnana there. The button has been pushed. There's no vijnana landing anywhere because it's done. That's why parinibbana is not somewhere after one is dead. Lord Buddha says this in the suttas. He says, I will teach you a way to attain parinibbana in this very life, dittheva dhamme. But people misunderstand. Commentaries have been written to push beyond this life, this thing called nibbana, and turn it into a place out there. No, the Arahant is there already. And that's why they're free. That's why we call them liberated, released from these: food, contact, intentional thinking, and consciousness. Yes, they're going through these. They still have a body. That's why they're called saupadhisesa. Saupadhisesa means with residues remaining, because they still have this body to deal with. And once they die, it is called anupadhisesa, without any remainder left. Poof. Where did the fire go? Left, right, up, down, where? East, west, north, south? No one can say. Similarly, bhikkhus, when passion is missing towards intentional thinking, etc., the same thing. And similarly, bhikkhus, when passion is missing towards sense awareness, as one is being nourished by it, if there's no delighting, no craving, then vijnana will have no place for it to land. And here is Lord Buddha's second beautiful analogy. He says, now bhikkhus, imagine there was a house or a pavilion with a peaked roof, one that has windows on its northern wall, its southern wall, and its eastern wall. Now, whenever the sun rises and the beams of sunlight come through into the pavilion, where would you say the sun's rays would land and become established? On the western wall, Bhante, because the sun rises from the east, right? So it's going to hit the western wall. And so they say western wall. And Lord Buddha goes, and if there were no western wall, where would the beams of light then land and be established? In that case, they would land and be established on the ground, Bhante. And if there were no ground or earth, where would the beams of light then land and be established? In that case, they would land and be established in the water, Bhante. But what if there were no water? Where would the beams of light then land and be established? In that case, they would not be able to land nor be established anywhere, Bhante. He just pulled the rug from underneath the beams of light. Vijnana has no place for it to land. See the power, the heavy, heavy, heavy power that passion has on us in dictating what will happen to us in the next moment or in the next life or lives. See how much delighting, how much power it has. See how much craving has. And not to be able to see these is ignorance. And then Lord Buddha goes, in just the same manner, because when there is no passion left towards edible food, as one is being nourished by it, there's no delighting in food, and there's no craving, as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness will have no place for it to land, and thus it will not be able to continue, for it has no possibility for developing. And he says the same thing about contact, same thing about mano sanchetana, intentional thinking, and finally, he says, when passion is missing towards sense awareness, there is no delighting in sense awareness, and there is no craving towards sense awareness, as one is being nourished by it, then as a result, consciousness, vijnana, will have no place for it to land. And thus it will not be able to continue on, for it has no possibility for developing. And when there is no consciousness landed, then there will not be namarupa to be pulled into a womb, because namarupa needs the gravitational pull of a vijnana. That's why namarupa is being pulled into a womb. You will never have namarupa showing up into a womb of a mother, or the next moment, as we were saying, without there being first the ground of vijnana. They go hand in hand. That's why you pull one, the other falls. You pull the other, this one falls. And when name and form is no longer pulled into a womb, then as a result, the activating habitual drive, sankhara, will not find themselves a new home to grow in, nor be expressed any further. And when the activating habitual drives, sankhara, are no longer expressed and thus are unable to persist, then as a result, there is no fabrication for a future rebecoming, punabhava. And when there is no more any fabrication for future rebecoming, then as a result, there is no more any rebirth to take place, no decay and no more aging, along with no more sickness and no death to be faced anywhere anymore. And when there is no more rebirth, no decay and no aging, along with no sickness and most certainly no more death, I declare that there is no more any pain, no more anguish, and no sorrow to be experienced anywhere anymore. This is the only path, this Dhamma and discipline, the only one that does not have salvation or the end goal be out there beyond the limits of this life. It's all here. What needs to be done is here, and you have absolute control over it. It's very powerful. But the human condition is such that that's too much power for many people. That's too much authority to be given. And that's one of the reasons why many of us will choose to stay in delusion by foregoing our responsibility, by giving up the importance of yoniso manasikara, the wise, radical attention, and which requires honesty towards what's happening, towards ourselves, towards the moment, towards our attitude. But Lord Buddha has given us such a wonderful set of toolbox with so many wonderful tools and instruments in there, where every aspect of this journey is covered. So it's up to us. So I will stop talking now and see if there are any questions that I can try to address. Uichi? Yes.
Bhante, this food thing in this suit. And here we are every day, we do lunch dana, there's just constant presentation of food everywhere. And it seems like it's the only thing. So I'm just there's this discrepancy. I don't know. So, yeah.
Sorry, you might have a follow-up. Was that it?
Yeah. So it's just I think it's a change of time, but I just don't get it. That somehow by doing danas on food, it's also the most important thing when we need to cut it off. But I guess when you have dispassion on food, one could kind of limit on it. So, but then there's this people going on and giving so much food everywhere, especially in Buddhism, and stressing on the importance of it. So I'm just finding it a little bit contradicting. So.
From what I'm understanding, the contradiction part is so much emphasis is being placed on it when Lord Buddha is saying, don't. But when there is sati, it's not glamorous. It's just food. But you have row upon row, group upon, when I was in Asia, I was seeing this, and sometimes people would come and sometimes they would be caught in traffic, and then finally they would get there, but the official blessing was over. So they would really be driving through traffic while the agitation level is growing exponentially in their mind, missing the opportunity, because this is a huge opportunity for gaining rewards and blessings, and they got the blessings. They were here. See, I told you we were supposed to be here 2 hours before. What's happened? Where's the Dhamma? It has many elements to it. Like anything else, if there isn't the element of virtue, meaning Sila, present, it's gone. If it doesn't have the samādhi portion present, as you're preparing the food, for example, as you're bringing the food, as the monk is eating the food, if it's missing, the sati, meaning the cultivation, bhavana, the mental cultivation is missing, then it's ruined, at least for one person. And what if there's a novice monk there, and the abbot has left, and you just got there with the food? What a wasted opportunity. Is there anything else we could give the abbot? Are you sure he's here? He's not. He's left. There's a person there, a novice. They could go and give him. Because rules are there to reduce. When Lord Buddha says, because we have in our mind this culture of rules are bad, they're against nature. No, not necessarily. Nature has many, many rules. Rules are there to reduce suffering, not to add. This is key, including the Vinaya rules, by the way. So even though a person would come with the food afterwards, like I would be in my room, and then I would hear a knock, and I'm about to rest. And I had a very long day. I met so many people, couples, this and that. So I finally ate something, and I came up to my room, and I'm resting, tuk, 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 on the door. Okay, so I open, and then I see a person bringing something, maybe a bowl of, I don't know, some berries or something. There's something that I'm not even going to eat. I can't digest. I can't say, excuse me, you missed it. Timing. No, I'll take it with both hands and say some words from the heart. And they feel good. So that is an opportunity to practice metta, while I'm also allowing them a space and time. So I'm not speaking so fast. because I'm allowing them to take what is being said. And in fact, on top, I use that as an opportunity for Dhamma. And guess what? While you were sitting there on your knees during the lunch dana, you're also creating a temple. That is the temple where human activity is taking place, because people sometimes spend over a day preparing in the kitchen, in their home. There's so much love being poured in. Sometimes they have to drive hours to come. That has to be expressed. And so there's a lot of activity there. So the gauging is important, not what we're observing on the outside. Unfortunately, this is the controversial part that you were referring to. Unfortunately, what we have turned the whole thing into is the rites and rituals. Nothing about the Dhamma that I've been studying and practicing for so many years, decades, has given me the understanding that rites and rituals are supposed to be part and parcel of the Dhamma. They're not. They are absolutely not. They can kill the Dhamma, and that's what they've been doing. And this is not just about Asia, by the way. This is everywhere. Every culture, I'm seeing different versions of it. So I have to take the time and express to them in a few words. And sometimes, so bringing the human element, joking about the fact that, oh, how was the traffic? What that does, it immediately dissipates the anxiety. Because you could tell them they're shaking, or they're feeling guilty that they came and they made the Bhikkhu or the monastic wait. So what? One time I was in Kandy in Sri Lanka, and I was a kappya as an attendant to a bhikkhu. And we went to this restaurant because he wanted to try Western food and he missed it. And so we went there, and it was a Pizza Hut in the middle of Kandy, which I thought was funny. And, right there is the Lord Buddha's, tooth relic housed in that temple of the tooth, temple of the tooth, right? So it's right there. You could see it from the window. And here is the Pizza Hut. So I think we were the only customers at that moment and in the day. And he's like, okay, chop, chop, let's go. And the order was given, but it felt so awkward to have this young lady see her get scolded because she's not able to turn the oven hot enough to make the flour, the bread of the pizza bake fast enough. Why? Because well, it's supposed to be eaten by 11:30. Why? You can go hungry for 7 days, 8 days, 10 days, 2 weeks. You're not going to die. Big deal. So this is, again, the rules are there not to create suffering for anyone, because I could see her eyes. It became teary-eyed because he scolded her. And I had to have a chat with him later on. This is not right, I said. Where's metta? It's just talk. Where's metta? Metta is live. It's life-giving. It doesn't know, language as such. It's universal. So it's up to the person and how so it's not necessarily the lunch dana that is the problem. That's what I'm trying to say. You can bring it out of this cement box of rites and rituals and make it alive again. Can you do that when you're eating? Can you imagine when you're biting into that, I don't know, whatever it is that you're eating, let's say, if it's a delicious dim sum or something. Okay, can you imagine in your mouth that razor blade? Because every moment is an opportunity for awakening, remember. So it's not a matter of pointing fingers at, oh, he did this, she did this, they did this, this. No. Ultimately, what does it matter? What I'm doing, that's key. Or what I'm not doing. Am I allowing the instincts take over and miss the whole opportunity? So I like to think of it like that. And is this helpful?
Very much. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad. And I'm glad that you're also up. I know it's like around 4 o'clock over the 4 a.m. So you and Joe in KL, this is good aditana for you. So if there are no more questions.
Bhante, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Ketni.
I was just, when you talk about food and also like becoming disenchanted with these things, including food, can I ask that you're not talking about, we're not using willpower or no, it's sort of just something, it happens as there's more sati, like there's less passion, but not from willpower, or like I'm not demanding myself to eat in this very strict way, pretending there's a razor blade in my mouth. It's just, does that make sense as a question?
I think it does. It all has to do with the caliber or gauge or level or measure of your urgency. I would approach it like that. Others might explain it differently, but in the way I like to approach it, because definitely there is willpower. There's willpower to be sitting there at the table.
Okay.
I was mentioning the incident, I think it was last week, about a student once, well, not just once, but several times, I would notice while sitting, they would literally drift off and fall to the side until, I mean, they had to almost go 90 degrees for them to come to and, wake up and sit up again. So later on, I tried so many different tools and they were really struggling. And I said, here's a question. When you're standing in front of the refrigerator door, do you ever doze off? Do you ever sleep? And she's laughed and she's like, no, of course not, Bhante. And I said, there you go. So you obviously have a willpower to be standing in front of the refrigerator door and say, which one should I get? What should I get? Which ice cream should I get? There's definitely willpower. Now, instead of following that line of thinking into being sucked into the passionate way of looking at the ice cream, here would be a person who would apply their willpower and say, am I really hungry? Do I really want to eat? And if you do really want to eat, which by the way requires willpower, which brings sati back into the picture, and then you go ahead and say, what really feels okay for me to eat right now? Something light, something heavy? So you're exercising wisdom here. How is this line of thinking working for you, by the way? Ketmini.
You're saying basically that just use, your own sense and decide in each moment what's appropriate?
Well, yes. However, it's not like you're complete, like I was saying in the beginning, it's not sitting on the passenger seat and waiting for development as such to take place on its own. There's no such thing.
Okay.
Because ultimately, it's a balance. Remember, the 7 factors of awakening, which I've mentioned in different talks, in previous talks, Lord Buddha says there is no awakening without these 7 factors. That's why they're called bodhangas. Bodhanga, bodhi in the beginning part. Sambodhi means the awakening. Anga is the factor part, sequential. So the factors of awakening. So you see here the 2 groups, because it's 7, right? So sati is the mindfulness, which needs to tell you, do I really want to eat? Okay, yeah, I do want to eat. Okay, then the second part comes in when you're looking at the mental objects, meaning the different things, concepts, memories, etc., that are creeping in while you're mindful. That's the Dhamma Vichaya, which is you applying skillful wisdom at that point. You're skillfully looking to see what's happening. If there's greed, that's what's going to detect it. But you need to supply it with enough fuel so that you can keep the engine of sati and Dhamma Vichaya working. That is virya. Okay? And then you have joy that comes up. Spiritual joy, that's piti. Then you get to tranquility, which is passaddhi, tranquility of the heart, the mind. And then you get to the collectedness of the heart or the mind, which is samādhi. And then you get to upekkha, which is equanimity. Now, the thing in between these 7 is sati, which is like the fulcrum. It is like the balance, because it keeps everybody in check. It's the thing, because on one side you're going to have the energized or energizing portion of the 7 factors, and where willpower also has a place. That's why I'm bringing this up. Willpower is there. Vidya in combination with Dhamma Vichaya is all about willpower. And joy is also there in the activating, energizing part. The other part is more of the relaxed part. So this seesawing is extremely important in use. Look how far, I mean, how much we've been talking about this food. Look how important it is. Ahara, this nourishment of food. How beautiful that Lord Buddha explained to us that you can attain Arahantship through food. And no Arahantship will ever occur haphazardly. This is an answer to your question about the will part. Because remember, if you're not using, applying wisdom, and you're not applying Dhamma Vichaya correctly, it's very easy for you to go to the extreme and become so dominating, such a words escape me. Such a one-sided dictator, and killing the whole beauty of the moment for the sake of, just like I was saying earlier with that example of, wait, it's 11:30, we need to eat. I have to eat. I have to eat. Why? What's wrong? Well, because Lord Buddha said if there's a stick on the ground, they didn't have watches, so the shadow should not go beyond 2 fingers. If it does, oh, done, you're not going to eat. Missing the whole point as to why Lord Buddha even instituted these rules. Meanwhile, he's giving such a terrible hard time to this young lady because she can't control the pizza, how fast, but he can control his behavior and be nice at least. He's applying willpower to make something happen. That is not what we're doing. I hope that answers your question, because there needs to be the wisdom. Otherwise, you're going to be probably anorexia, deal with anorexia, bulimia. Something like that, where you're just going to become anorexia, have anorexia nervosa or something, or become bulimic. Well, because Bhante said you shouldn't eat. Well, I didn't say that. Do I have passion? Am I leaning into the food? Am I appreciating the fact that somebody cooked for me, baked this, brought these fruits to me? Well, what am I going to? I'm not going to go into this la-la land of memories. Oh, yes, I remember when I had these blueberries. I was in Chile or I was in New Zealand. Yes, that was a... No. I'm gone. I'm off the reservation. I'm gone. There's no sati there. When I'm eating, am I able to be aware of the sour, sweet taste of, or the texture of the blueberry? Very matter of fact. Lord Buddha, when he was giving a very succinct instruction to Venerable Bahya, the quickest to attain Arahantship, with the shortest instruction, he said, Dite ditamattang, sute sutamattang, mute mutamattang, vinyate vinyatamattang. When seeing, just see Bahya, bhavissati. When you hear, just hear Bahya. When you are sensing, meaning either through the nose, either through the tongue or the body, just sense Bahya. When you are cognizing, knowing something, don't do anything else other than to know. Don't add any sub-commentary. Oh, it's happening to me. Don't become identified with it. So this is teaching you to become more grounded with what is truly happening with you at that particular moment. With the body, yes, if it's food. So I think I've said enough about this. So, but if it's still unsatisfactory or something, or you need more clarity on this, of course you can email me, because I have to rest. So let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahiddhika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahiddhika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahiddhika punyantang anamoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu. Wonderful questions, by the way. Questions that I think Lord Buddha and the Arya Savakas would have been very pleased in hearing. And I hope I did justice in little that I know to be able to address them properly according to this Dhamma and discipline of Lord Buddha. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you and all your loved ones, and may your practice grow and flourish, and may there be soothing contentment in your hearts, and may you come to experience, taste the paths and fruits, the magga and phala of this noble path, by attaining the highest fruits, attaining Arahantship in this very life, not in another life, in this one. So until next time, Sukhi Hota.